Penguin Random House Audio presents The Iran Wars, Spy Games, Bank Battles, and the Secret Deals That Reshaped the Middle East, by J. Solomon. Read for you by Rob Shapiro. Prologue. A Diplomatic Ruse. Since the 1980s, the Islamic Republic of Iran steadily, though erratically, developed the technologies needed to build nuclear weapons. Though the West constructed expansive defenses to stop these advances, it achieved only limited success. This would all change during the second term of President Barack Obama. On September 26, 2013, Secretary of State John Kerry, just 6 months on the job, attended his first international meeting on the Iran nuclear crisis in a dilapidated conference room at the United Nations headquarters in New York. The top diplomats of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, the United States, Russia, China, France, and the United Kingdom, plus representatives from Germany and the European Union, gathered around the table to reach a major advance toward making a nuclear deal with Iran. Or so they thought. On Kerry's left sat the Iranian delegation, headed by its U.S.-educated foreign minister Javad Zarif, known for his impeccable English and disarming smile. The wooden conference table was bathed in an eclectic mix of purple, red, and gray, reflecting off the room's decades-old wallpaper. Journalists from across the globe jammed into stakeout positions outside the hall, anticipating the results of the highest-level meeting ever between diplomats from Washington and the Islamic Republic. Circumstances seemed ripe for a thaw in their relations. The meeting between Iran and the so-called P5+1 diplomatic bloc was also the first opportunity for the two sides to discuss their positions on the nuclear talks since Kerry's appointment, and the election of the moderate Iranian President Hassan Rouhani 3 months earlier in Tehran. Years of failed talks had stoked real fears in the Obama White House and Europe that Israel might attack Iran's nuclear facilities. This meeting, the diplomats hoped, could ward that off. The Iranian politician and cleric had won the vote on a pledge to improve his country's ties with the West and end Iran's economic isolation. U.S.-led sanctions aimed at curbing Tehran's nuclear program by targeting oil profits held in banks around the world were crippling Iran's economy. The penalties cut Iran's oil revenues in half and diminished the value of its currency, the rial, by 2/3. Aides to Rouhani privately warned the president that their country could run short of hard currency and face a crisis if Tehran wasn't able to quickly get its hands on tens of billions of dollars of oil revenue frozen in Asian, European, and Middle Eastern bank accounts. Iran's Islamic Revolution, which Rouhani had championed since his 20s, was in jeopardy. Zarif didn't let on to the dire state of Iran's finances and made a self-assured presentation to the room, according to diplomats who took part in the meeting. He described the standoff over Iran's nuclear program, which had dragged on for nearly a decade, as a manufactured crisis. He said his government had no intention of developing nuclear weapons and that it was willing to allow international inspectors from the UN significantly more access to Iran's nuclear sites. Tehran was also willing to diminish its stockpiles of nuclear fuel, which included enough medium-enriched uranium for at least 2 nuclear weapons. He said a deal should be easy to put in place. We hope to be able to make progress toward resolving this issue in a timely fashion based on respecting the rights of the Iranian people to nuclear technology for peaceful purposes, Zarif told reporters after the meeting. At the same time, we need to make sure that there is no concern at the international level that Iran's nuclear program is anything but peaceful. Kerry and Zarif, however, weren't exactly being straight with the foreign ministers assembled at the meeting or with the media outside, many of whom thought this meeting marked only a first step. The two statesmen, whose countries had been enemies for nearly 4 decades, were collaborating in an elaborate diplomatic ruse for the benefit of their presidents and, they believed, peace. The meeting at the UN was a coming-out party. For more than 2 years already, Kerry had been secretly reaching out to Iranian leaders to attempt a compromise on a nuclear agreement. The former Democratic presidential candidate had started this secret diplomatic work in late 2011, while still serving as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He'd used the position for a range of other diplomatic missions, such as attempting to broker a peace deal between Syria and Israel and mending U.S. ties with the mercurial Afghan leader Hamid Karzai. But his efforts on Iran were particularly high stakes and included secret trips to the Persian Gulf country of Oman, where he discussed building bridges to Iran with Oman's Sultan, Qaboos bin Said al Said. Oman's monarch was one of the only Arab rulers who had strong ties to Tehran's paramount political figure, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Kerry sent messages to the Ayatollah through the Sultan's offices, indicating that the United States was willing to make significant concessions on the nuclear dispute, which had remained deadlocked since Tehran's vast infrastructure was revealed in 2002. The standoff focused more than anything else on Iran's demands that it had the right to produce nuclear fuel on its soil through the enrichment of uranium. The technology was threatening international stability because it could be used both for powering a nuclear reactor and for producing the core of an atomic weapon. Kerry indicated to Khamenei for the first time that the United States could accept Iran enriching uranium, provided significant monitoring be put in place. Through the Omanis, the politician also discussed confidence-building measures with Iran, such as prisoner swaps and joint efforts to fight terrorism. Kerry wasn't acting alone, nor was he the only American going through Oman. His efforts bolstered President Barack Obama's own secret initiative to have direct talks with the Iranian regime, which began at the start of his presidency in 2009. Like Kerry's meetings, initially behind the backs of the Security Council and the United States' closest Middle East allies, including Israel and Saudi Arabia. In 2012, more than a year before Kerry, Zarif, and the rest of the P5+1 met in the conference room in New York, White House and State Department officials sat down with an Iranian delegation in the Omani capital, Muscat, in the first direct meeting between the United States and Iran on the nuclear issue since the revolution in 1979. Kerry was not present. That encounter was kept secret because of the White House's fears that Israel and the Arab states, and their allies in Washington, might try to upend the diplomacy if they got word. The United States knew that any moves toward rapprochement between Washington and Tehran would be viewed as a threat to these countries, which feared a stronger Iran. This first meeting made little progress, but the escalating U.S. sanctions on Iran and Rouhani's election in June 2013 accelerated the diplomacy to the point where many of the terms of a framework for an accord were already agreed to by the time of the meeting at the United Nations in New York. Zarif hinted at some of the broad outlines of a deal to the P5+1, but neither he nor Kerry let their diplomatic partners know just how far the bilateral track had advanced, or how close they were to an initial nuclear agreement. I think all of us were pleased that Foreign Minister Zarif came and made a presentation to us, Kerry told reporters, giving no sign of a larger deal already in the works. Exiting the meeting, Kerry and Zarif met privately in an adjacent room at the United Nations, not much larger than a phone booth. A scheduled 15-minute meet and greet turned into a substantive 45-minute discussion. The two men exchanged personal email addresses and cell phone numbers to lay the groundwork for what they anticipated would be stepped-up negotiations in the ensuing months. Their staffs were instructed to do the same. Both men privately said they remained deeply skeptical of the other, due to their government's historical hostility, but at the same time, they expressed hope their efforts could forge a diplomatic thaw between the United States and Iran, ending more than 40 years of estrangement. The September 2013 meetings in
Sample complete. Ready to continue?